So what lessons, if any, can be learned by law enforcement after what happened over the weekend in Charlottesville? How do you strike the balance of protecting the safety of citizens while not infringing on the First Amendment rights of protesters and counter-protesters in a highly charged environment? For answers, we turn to Dr. G.M. Cox, who is the director of the Public Administration Master's Degree Program at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth. Good morning, Dr. Cox. Start by giving us your take on what you saw in Charlottesville this weekend.
Good morning. Well, clearly you see protesters with, their message is not popular. Their message is unpopular. And quite frankly, they want people to respond. So they had the counter-protesters, and the counter-protesters did exactly what the protesters wanted them to do. And then, of course, the police have to police this very dynamic thing. They had noticed. They obviously had through permitting, but the judge, they tried to deny the permit, and a judge stepped in and said, you can't do that. And I agree in this case with the judge. On the other hand, the Supreme Court's ruled that you can take steps to make sure that protesters and counter-protesters don't meet. So you try to have different venues. And within this idea of public safety, police departments have, fairly broad license to respond with personnel and equipment and so on. But it's still a dynamic thing. It's like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until you get hit in the face, and they obviously got hit in the face. Did they transition to plan B, C, D, and F fast, quickly enough, and did they have the assets in the right place? That's the question I would have.
Right. I mean, with weeks to get ready for this situation, as you mentioned, they knew it was going to be a charged-up situation. Were the police in Charlottesville, as some have criticized, not properly prepared?
I don't know. I'm not willing to go there yet. I think what happened, that the car getting down that street, I want to know why the egress avenues into the protest area wasn't barricaded or controlled by some method. And you can't just put barricades up. People ignore those. You have to put some type of physical barrier there that they can't just move out of the way. So I think the police in Charlottesville and the state police are going to definitely, approach this from lessons learned. I got to tell you, before that, if you look at this, let's take this situation and break it into two distinct parts. There's actually three moving parts, but we're going to break it into two distinct parts. We got the protesters, counter-protesters. And then we have the car. So the car is the second set of circumstances. If you take the car out of this, we've got a pretty successful protest and counter-protest. We don't have many people hurt. We don't have many arrests. The police officers are in. They have a presence, but they don't overreact.
We're on the phone with Dr. G.M. Cox, director of the Public Administration Master's Degree Program at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth, Texas. We're talking about what law enforcement can learn from the deadly white nationalist protest in Charlottesville this weekend. I mean, it seems like absolutely a no-win situation for law enforcement on a day like this. You don't want to be seen, as you said, as being too heavy-handed and infringe on First Amendment rights, but you obviously don't want to see anyone hurt and certainly not killed in an act of terror like we saw this weekend. So, I mean, it sounds like an obvious question, but shouldn't the safety of citizens trump everything else in a conflict of opposing groups who believe they have rights?
That's right. I mean, but, the police are put in a no-win situation, and that's okay. I mean, police know what our jobs are. But the courts have said, and our Constitution says, that people have the freedom of speech and they have the freedom to assemble. That doesn't mean we have to like what they say.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Cox. That's G.M. Cox, director of the Public Administration Master's Degree Program at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth.